Welcome to yet another spectacular session of the day. On behalf of Namita Gokhale, William Dalrymple, Sanjoy Roy, and all my colleagues at JLF Colorado, Teamwork Arts, Boulder Public Library, and the City of Boulder, we welcome you to this session of JLF Colorado 2021 Virtual Festival. The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, Alka Joshi, in conversation with Arsen Kashkashian. Writer Alka Joshi's latest work, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, second in the Jaipur trilogy, takes forward the stories of the iconic characters from her best-selling novel, The Henna Artist. Rooted deeply in Rajasthan's remarkable history and varied traditions, the narrative explores the underbelly of Jaipur city and gives us a gritty look into nuances of class, identity, and deceit. In conversation with Arsen Kashkashian, Alka takes us an evocative journey through Lakshmi's life as she explores the process of giving voice to the silenced. Introducing our speakers for this session, Alka Joshi was born in India and raised in the United States from the age of 9. She has a BA from Stanford University and MFA from California College of Arts. Joshi's debut novel, The Henna Artist, became a New York Times bestseller, a Reese Witherspoon Bookclub pick, and is being developed into an episodic TV series. Her sequel, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, will be followed by a third book in the trilogy in 2023. Arsen Kashkashian is the head buyer of the Boulder Bookstore and is the co-host of the monthly KGNU Boulder Bookstore Radio Book Club with Maeve Conran, where each episode features an author interview. The greatest adventure of his book-selling career was attending and participating in the Jaipur Festival, India in 2021. In these difficult times, we have struggled to bring you JLF Colorado without charging a registration fee. Please support as generously as you can to ensure a free, seamless, and continuous flow of knowledge. You can support us through the Support JLF option button on the right-hand side of your screen. Your support is greatly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, now presenting The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, Alka Joshi, in conversation with Arsen Kashkashian. Arsen, over to you.
Thank you, Suraj. So, Alka, these are wonderful novels, the first two, and I can't wait for the third one in the trilogy. And I thought I'd start off by asking you, so The Secret Keeper of Jaipur and The Henna Artist is a woman named Lakshmi. And in the acknowledgments of the first book, The Henna Artist, you say that it was kind of a reimagination of your mother's existence. And from what I gather, your mother lived a very different life than Lakshmi. So I was wondering if you could take us, how did you get from your mother to Lakshmi? How did you develop this character? What was the spark?
My mother was raised in a very conventional way. She had an arranged marriage at 18. She had 3 children by the time she was 22. By the way, she told me that the first time she'd ever talked to my dad was on their wedding night. And, she just never had any agency over her life. All the decisions in her life were made for her by her father and then my father. And then she was at the behest of all 5 of us, So she was constantly, playing for somebody else. She was never focused on what she could do with her life. And I thought what a remarkable thing it was that an immigrant woman from the East decides to raise her daughter very differently from the way she is raised. Instead of continuing the traditional way that I think many immigrant families will do once they go outside of India, my parents did something completely different. So my mother said to me, you will choose your own partner, you will choose your own career, you will choose whether or not you want children, how many you want, those will all be your decisions. So I thought, it's just a remarkable and also courageous of her to have raised me in this very non-traditional way. I have had an amazing life, and I think my mother would like to have had my life, where I've done whatever I wanted to do in my life. I decided not to have children. That was very important for me. I decided to get married when I was ready to get married, and I've lived all over the world working and, just hanging out. So I thought, how can I thank my mother for all of those years? And I couldn't think of a better way than to create a fictional character who gets to do all the things that I think my mother would love to have done back in the 1950s. So Lakshmi, the henna artist, deserts her marriage after 2 years. She's not happy. She decides that there's a larger world out there that she wants to see. And she goes around forging her own life with her own skills, her own talents, and her own wits. And I think my mother would have really loved to see the publication of this first novel and then the second novel with this character of Lakshmi. Unfortunately, Mom died about 2 years into the making of the first novel. So she knew what I was writing, and she thought it was amusing that I had fashioned this character after her. But I think that the character of Lakshmi will now live on way beyond my mother in a way I never could have imagined, and in a way I think my mother could never have imagined.
So Lakshmi, as you mentioned, is a very independent character. And the first book is set in 1955, 56, maybe early 57. And the second book is set in 69, basically. Right. And you're just coming out of the independence of India during the first book. How common, how unusual or common was Lakshmi's life at that point in time for a woman to take control of her own finances? She's trying to build a house in the first book. So how unusual was that, or were there women like this that you were able to base this on to some extent?
I think it would have been unusual, uncommon, but I don't think that she's the first woman to have done something like this in her era. In fact, I think in every era, we have seen women do extraordinary things to buck convention and to go on and live lives of their own making. We have not heard about all of these women. We hear every now and then, we'll hear about Joan of Arc or the suffragettes or, women who fly planes and, women who start revolutions. But I wanted to write a novel about an ordinary woman who does extraordinary things just by wanting a very different life for herself. She doesn't have to be the hero of a major war or, an epic, but she does get to be the hero of her own story. So I think that the only reason that we think Lakshmi is highly unusual is because we haven't read all of the stories of all the Lakshmis in this world. And through historical fiction, a lot of us authors get to talk about the women that actually did live in all of these eras that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. So her talents at first are being a henna artist, but she also has so much more. She's an herbalist. She has all sorts of talents. She's somewhat of a therapist, which, and so Henna, talk about what role that has in Indian society, and how does that give Lakshmi entree into much higher levels of Indian society than one might expect for a woman who's just abandoned her marriage, come from a small town, and is trying to make it in Jaipur.
Well, I think that what you just said is precisely why I have Lakshmi doing henna as a way to make a living. Henna in India, it's called mehndi. Some people call it henna, but it's basically an art that's been practiced for thousands of years. It is a way to bring calm to a woman, to nurture her, to give her that kind of self-care feeling right before a wedding, before a festival, before any kind of major event that's happening in her life. So it's something that I always saw as a girl growing up in India. A lot of women were having their hands and their feet hennaed. And I thought, well, this is something that almost any woman could learn to do. And if she has any kind of artistic ability, she can really take it to another level. And that's exactly what Lakshmi is able to do. Now, the whole idea of Lakshmi being able to do these very elaborate designs, which of course just came out of my imagination. I've never seen another henna artist do the kinds of designs that I wrote in the book. My mother pointed out to me that in 1955, when she had her wedding henna done, that it was not as elaborate as what I am having Lakshmi do, very intricate, very detailed henna. My mother said that hers was applied with a finger, so the paste was only able to make like a little circle circle here, maybe some dots here, dots going up the fingers. That's about it. And I said, yes, but Mom, look at this. Lakshmi has no experience doing anything else. She has no skills, no education beyond a certain grade level. And so I have to be sure that she can make it on her own. So I'm going to have her do this henna that is, I'm going to take creative license, which is something I get to do as an author. And I'm going to have her do whatever it comes to my imagination. And this is the way that she will be able to make 10 times more than everybody else. But as you said, she also does a couple of other things that henna artists don't usually do. And I've never seen a henna artist who actually feeds people. So Lakshmi is able to take her knowledge of herbs and spices and how they can affect a woman's temperament, how they can affect her sexuality in all these different ways. She's able to take those herbs and spices, put them in these namkeen and these mithai, the sweets and snacks that she makes of her own accord. And then as the henna is drying on her patron's hand, she's able to feed them things that are actually helping them realize their desires and dreams. They don't, of course, realize that is where the power is coming from, but Lakshmi, of course, is fully aware of that. And then the last thing that you mentioned is this whole idea of confidant. Lakshmi does become a confidant because I made her a high caste woman who's doing the work of a lower caste. And when she's able to do that, she can straddle all the different castes and classes in between. She can be as comfortable on her patron's divan doing her henna as she is in the kitchen working with the domestic staff and finding out the latest gossip. So these are the things that I had to put in the character in order to make her that kind of extraordinary woman who is able to do a lot of different things and whom people will confide their secrets in.
Well, I found it very interesting that she was a Brahmin, and she's considered a fallen Brahmin because, as you said in the book, not necessarily because she does henna, but because she handles people's feet. She does the henna of people's feet. And I found that to be very interesting. And this concept, I think in America, we don't quite understand exactly how caste works. And I thought the way you did it, kind of taking somebody who was of a higher caste, but then having them be fallen, having them not have the luxury and the money and the things that you might expect when you say Brahmin into somebody in America, I think you have a much different vision than Lakshmi. And so I guess you talked about it a little bit, but how do the other Brahmins see her? I mean, they confide in her, but overall, how do they really see her? How do they accept her or not accept her?
They accept the fact that she can sit on the same divan as them, because normally a henna artist would be sitting at your feet, or she might be sitting on a small stool at your feet if you are the mistress of the house. She wouldn't be sitting on the same sofa as you. You wouldn't be having tea with her. You wouldn't be ordering tea for her, those kinds of things. So they consider her an equal in that respect, but they are pitying her. They feel sorry for her, that she doesn't have a husband, that she has led them to believe that her husband deserted her, which of course makes them even more sorry for her and don't like to bring up the subject of her marriage. Then of course they feel sorry for her because there's no family nearby, and a person with no family nearby in India is sort of considered lost, or a little someone that they can feel they're better than. So that's how the women see themselves with her. They feel that they are better than her. Thank God they are not in her place, but that, she has the demeanor of somebody that they can relate to and they can confide in. So, I think that one of the things that people in other countries get fascinated by is India's caste system. But maybe what they don't realize is that in their own countries, there is an informal caste system. So somebody like Lakshmi might be the gardener, might be the housekeeper that you don't necessarily invite to your dinner table. This is what happens in the United States. So we have our own caste system, as Isabel Wilkerson so cleverly pointed out in her book, Caste. And I've always felt that no matter what country I have lived in, I have sensed that there is a caste system. It's just not as defined as India's caste system is. And by the way, my mother pointed this out to me when I was writing the book. She said, Lakshmi's a Brahmin. She said, if you are making Lakshmi in my image, then, my father would never have allowed me to become a henna artist. How is it that Lakshmi gets to be a henna artist? I said, because Mom, her parents are not there with her. So she's free to do whatever she wants. And in fact, when I have spoken to henna artists who are very successful in their careers here in the United States, they told me that if they were Brahmin, they told me that their parents would never have allowed them to become henna artists in India. But with all the years that have passed and the more acceptance of henna around the world and the fact that they live in a different country and the entire family doesn't have to see them all the time, they have become henna artists, very successful ones in the United States.
So I mentioned earlier that the first book is set in 1955, 56. And, not too long after India's independence. And it was interesting. After I finished the two books, I went back and I decided I want to read chapter 1 again, just to see, of the first book, just to see. So there's a prologue to the first book, but then chapter 1 starts in Lakshmi's voice. And that's where you stay for the entirety of the first book. She's the narrator. But I was very fascinated when I went back to find the opening line was, independence changed everything. Independence changed nothing. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. And it also somehow reminded me a little bit of Tale of Two Cities, like
yes.
It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. But talk about that idea of independence and how does that, because that is her opening line of the whole book. And how does that play over both books? India trying to find its way in the world, Lakshmi is a character trying to find her way in the world.
Well, Arsen, you guessed it. So this is an homage to Dickens, of course. Independence changed everything in the way that Indians could finally breathe again. They were not under the control of the British. They felt 300 million people in India at the time were living there and were just ecstatic about the fact that they could now design their own country's policies about education, about the way people would live, about the way the poor would be taken care of, and so on and so on. And also what industries they needed to rebuild, the industries that the British had destroyed while they had been there for 200 years. So it was very important for Indians to feel that kind of energy and vibrancy, and I wanted to capture that. But what independence did not change, of course, were things like the status of women. Independence had nothing to do with that. Independence was for the nation, and it had nothing to do with whether women were now suddenly having a lot more power or agency in their lives. And so this is where Lakshmi is discovering her agency, her identity, at the same time that India as a nation is gaining its identity and its footing in its trajectory. And I think it's sort of remarkable. One of the things I really try to point out in both books, whether it's the Henna Artist or the Secret Keeper of Jaipur, what I try to point out is that I think that in the short 70 years since independence, since India's independence, the Indians themselves have been so resilient, have been so advanced in their thinking about how they wanted to grow their country, how they wanted to grow their people, how they wanted to expand their skills throughout the world, that I think the world needs to recognize this. And I want the world to recognize this. This is an important thing about the East that I don't think the West always recognizes, that the East has been there far longer. They understand that whether or not they are going to lose their power at one point or another, they will regain it, and it will be their chance again. And I think that's something, for example, a young country like the United States, which I absolutely love, but a young country like the United States has never lost its power and has not known what it is to rebuild again. And it was so important for me to capture that for the Indians in these two books.
Yeah, well, you do a great job. And, I'm so thankful in part to the Jaipur Literature Festival that I got to go to Jaipur and see that city and see the vibrancy of it, but also the history of it. It's overlaid, this new energy, this excitement that is what's happening in India now. But at the same time, you're going by these palaces that point to this bygone era of power. And a lot of them, as you mentioned, I think in the second book, mostly The Secret Keeper, have been turned into hotels. Some of them have been turned into boutique hotels and things. And but I was wondering if you could talk about that. What you do really nicely, I think, is you take us into these beautiful palaces, but also we see the existence, what it's like to try to exist on the street. You have a character named Malik, who's a very key character in both books, and he's coming from the street. He kind of trails after Lakshmi in the first book until she kind of takes him on. So you see these huge stratification of the society. So talk about trying to get both of those in the book, and now and how that relates to the story.
You know, Arsen, before I was a writer, and I didn't start writing until my 50s, but before I was a writer, I used to wonder as a reader, how do people develop these stories? How do writers develop characters that are so amazing and feel real, and I care about them and I don't want to leave them at the end of the story? And I have to tell you, since I became an author, I don't even know how it's done, but here is how the story comes to me. It comes to me in scenes that are so vibrant and so fully realized. So with Malik, here is what happened, this street child. I know that every time I go to India, any city I go to, there are all these street children running around because their parents are very busy earning enough money or enough food for the day. And so the kids are often truant, and they're trying to help out the family by also, gathering some food or money or here and there that they can. So what was really interesting is that Malik was standing at a street corner. This is how I saw it in Jaipur. And he was across the street watching Lakshmi standing there waiting to cross. And he thought, I keep seeing this one woman, and every time I see her, she is better turned out. She always has a purpose. She seems determined to be going places here, there, and everywhere. And so if I hitch my star to her, could I go places with her that would be far faster than me trying to fetch, a rupee from this person or 2 rupees from that person? And so he walked up to her one day and he held out his hand like this. And she thought, oh no, another beggar, I don't want to give him money. She turns around, and then he tugs at her sari. She turns around again, and he's still holding out his hand. And she thought, all right, let me see if this works. So she hands him one of her tiffins, and you know what tiffins are? They're stainless steel containers where a lot of Indians, will put their food and take it around with them for lunch and dinner. But she puts the handle of the tiffin right there between his fingers, and he clasps his fingers around that tiffin. She turns around, and then he follows her. That is a relationship that I saw between the two of them in a scene that just came to me. It's a very busy street, and everything is going on, and yet these two people have made a connection. So Malik comes to her, and then she takes care of him, and she decides that if he is brave enough to approach somebody completely different and say, look, I can be of help to you. And then he does prove his worth by negotiating things for her, getting new suppliers and, getting better prices and so on. Then, she is going to help him out in his life too. So it's a symbiotic relationship. And it was very important for me to have Malik be Muslim and Lakshmi be Hindu in this relationship. And the reason for that is because I really think that those symbiotic relationships exist in India, but the world does not know about them. And in India, whenever I go, I see Hindus and Muslims living next to one another, making movies together. I see them having businesses together. So, they coexist many times in a very friendly way. It's just that the world seems to think, because the world only sees media stories when there's conflict between Hindus and Muslims. So the world thinks that there is never any harmony between those two. And it was very important for me to create a relationship between those two because I want to model the relationships that I want to see more of in this world. I don't want to create more disharmony.
There was one scene where him being a Muslim seemed to play a part of Sheila not wanting him involved with her mandala. She was having a mandala made. She was like a teenager, and so that was really the only time not negatively, but that character had a negative reaction to him based on that. Other than that, he's very accepted. He's like you said, he's so resourceful. I really loved him, and And going back to your comment about Dickens, I mean, he does seem like he could be a kid out of Dickens in some ways.
Right, right. Absolutely. He could be like so many, Oliver Twist or, any one of those kind of kids. I think that what's important is that characters have to feel real, which means that they do good things and they do bad things, that they are capable of betrayal and have other people betray them. So in all of my characters, you will see points where they are downtrodden, where somebody is taking advantage of them or treating them badly. And you'll also see them triumph in some way, because I think that is a reality for all of us. We do good things, we do bad things. We are all capable of doing horrible things and doing things that completely surprise us and surprise the world. So I want my characters to feel that real. And I think that is why it comes very naturally to me to imbue them with things that aren't really pleasant. Sheila in the first book treats Malik very badly. But isn't it interesting that when he looks totally different, and she knows he's Muslim in book number 2 because of his name. I mean, she'll know immediately he's Muslim, but in book number 2, she treats him very differently because now he's in a class that is acceptable to her. He is well turned out. He has a nice haircut. He no longer wears rubber chappals. Now he wears closed-toed shoes. And so suddenly he's acceptable to her. So I think I'm making a statement about that one scene that you're referring to, not so much about the fact that he's Muslim, but more about the fact that he's of a very different class. And Sheila, as a spoiled girl, wants only somebody like Lakshmi to do her mandala.
Well, it's so interesting, and I think you do this so well in both books, how class, caste, education, how all these things are kind of crossing and intertwined, and it's much more complicated than any one individual thing. And religion is just a piece of that, of a person's identity. One of the people you talk about, the good and bad in people. One of your most fascinating characters, plays a key role in both books, is Samir.
Yeah.
And he's a character. He's kind of Lakshmi's benefactor, because she was doing henna for the courtesans, prostitutes in Agra, where he found her, and he brought her to Jaipur and introduces her to kind of a high-class society matrons of Jaipur, which enables her to have a much better living. Right. At the same time, there's an attraction between them, and I don't want to give too much away. But he also does some things that are you would think are terrible or not good. And I felt you kept up the duality of his character throughout both books. Like, there are just scenes where you're like, oh, what a terrible person. And there's other scenes like, this guy has real integrity. Talk about that character, because I think it's sometimes easier to paint somebody. He's like the rich guy who can control things, and it's certainly easier, I think, to portray them as being duplicitous, having duplicity and being kind of evil. And it seems like he's going to turn a little bit that way, but in the second book, it's not true. He does have some integrity.
Right, exactly. So I think that most of my female readers and maybe some of my male readers are very much in love with Samir because he is charming. He's charming. He's funny. He is fun to be around. And he and Lakshmi have a very playful relationship. And as I said before, I love this idea of showing the duality in all of our characters and all of my characters in my books. It's very interesting to me. He is this person whom I have known very often in India, in France, in England, in Canada, all over the world. I have seen this person who is very charming, and you want to spend time with them. But as a woman, I know that I don't want to go really close to that because that's trouble. And, I just know that any kind of stable alliance with that person is not possible. So that's kind of what I'm trying to show with Samir. And I do think that by the time we see him again in the second book, he has lost some of his agency in his relationship with his wife. His wife has now gained a lot more agency in that relationship. And I do think that this happens with couples. Sometimes we start off with one person having a lot more power in the relationship, and after 20, 30 years, somebody else ends up with more power because of just, what happens. And in a way, I think Parvati has realized that Samir is not capable of dealing with really difficult situations the way that she is. And I think, this happens. I mean, I think that in relationships, there's always one person who turns out to be stronger than the other. So while Samir may be charming, I think he's not as strong as Parvati is ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I mean, and when you read the second book, again, I don't want to give anything away, and I said he has integrity, but the question is, she might have the integrity behind him, and he doesn't have the will or the power anymore to go against her wanting to do the right thing, I think.
Yeah. And
so
what else Arsen, what else I'm trying to explore in book number 2 is the relationship between parents and their adult children. So we see this both with Parvati and Samir and how they are reacting to Ravi and what Ravi is doing in book number 2. And this huge opportunity there for parents to do the right thing and to discipline a child or to not discipline them, and what does that do to that child? There's a pattern there in their relationship with Ravi that has continued on through the years back when he was a boy. Now, the other relationship that is based on, a parent figure and a child is Lakshmi and Malik. Lakshmi has been Malik's guardian for over 12 years. And she is so used to sort of managing his life and guiding him that I think in book number 2, when he is already 20 years old, she's having a really hard time letting go. She's having a hard time realizing that maybe she can let go now, that she has taught him everything that she needs to have taught him, put him in the right direction, and now he can make his own decisions about life. She is still micromanaging him, which is why he ends up in Jaipur, which is why she wants him to have this profession that is very respectable, this construction profession, but also she wants to get him away from his love interest in Shimla with the nomadic woman who is illiterate.
Yeah, let's talk about Shimla, because the second book does not open in Jaipur. Malik is there, but the rest of the characters, Lakshmi most importantly, is not. So talk about where is Shimla and what is Lakshmi doing 12 years later from the end of the Henna Artist?
So Lakshmi has been creating this healing garden, and it is to grow plants that have medicinal properties that she can harvest and use for the more indigenous clients or patients of the community clinic up in Shimla. And these patients will come to them. They don't like the smelly ointments of the West. They don't want to take a pill. They would much rather apply a poultice that's made out of plants, maybe a poultice that's made out of spices or something like a turmeric and, cotton, coconut oil poultice that they can put on their hurt or on their, skin that will help heal them in a way that, in a way that makes them feel comfortable, because that's what they're always used to being treated by. And so Lakshmi has been developing her healing garden in Shimla. She works with the good doctor at the community clinic, and she helps him out with some of the patients. She has learned a lot about being with him and then figuring out what the patient needs, whether it's a Western application or an Eastern application. And so as she is doing this, she meets Nimmi. Nimmi is a nomadic woman who has chosen to live in Shimla after her husband died on one of their migration treks from the north and the south in the Himalayas. And by the way, Arsen, I had such a fun time researching these nomadic tribes that still exist in the Himalayas today that go up and down those mountains. They are really amazing, you know, the way that they look after themselves and have all of their own methods of surviving and healing themselves in these mountains. And so Nimmi, it turns out, has knowledge of other kinds of herbs and plants and flowers that Lakshmi does not have. So she's very interested in finding out what Nimmi knows and then putting her to work in the healing garden so that maybe, you know, they can even have more success with some of their patients than they have had before.
So in the Secret Keeper of Jaipur, you have a first-person narrative as you did in the Henna Artist, but you rotate it between 3 characters, and suddenly I felt that was a real chance you took as an author, and I think it really worked. I really enjoyed it. But you have Lakshmi with such a strong voice in the Henna Artist, but then you, like I said, you took a chance and you go away from her for almost 2/3 of the book. I mean, you're rotating quickly in chapters. So you're never away from Lakshmi for more than maybe 20 pages, but right. You get 10 pages of her. Tell us about that decision and how did you come to it? Was it something that took a while or is it just something you saw from the beginning?
Well, I'll tell you something. So when I was writing the first book, and you know, it took me 10 years to fully realize that first book as something that could be published. But as I was writing it, I had a first-person narrative from Lakshmi's point of view, and then every alternate chapter was from Radha's point of view, first-person narrative. And it was my agent who said, it's not working. It's not working because you are not as successful with Radha's narrative as you are with Lakshmi's. Lakshmi really just comes through very powerfully. So just stick with her, cut out all those other pages. Oh my gosh, it was such a, it was so hard for me to give up those pages because it was like 130 pages just went out the door. And you know, you work so hard on those pages and you think, no, those are my babies. You're making me kill my babies. But I eventually got rid of them because I couldn't figure out any other way to solve the problem. And then I just did Lakshmi's voice. So when it came to write the second book, Malik's voice came through first. It was very clear. It was very clear what he wanted to do, what he was going to talk about, and so on. And then came Lakshmi's voice, and she was telling me where she was. She was taking that early morning walk around her house and sees Nimmi standing at her door. And she knows she has to go talk to Nimmi and read her that letter that came from Malik. And then Nimmi's voice came through. As I did more and more research about the nomads, this woman Nimmi really came through and became a very strong character in my mind. And she wanted to tell me what she was thinking. And I thought, I wonder if I could make this work this time. And so I went through and for each character who was telling me what they wanted to say, I wrote it in their first person, wrote it in the first person, wrote it in the first person. And you know what? Everybody said, yeah, this works. So maybe I learned something through the first process about how you make a character come alive on a page without taking anything away from any of the other characters. So I think it was an experiment. And with each book, I do want to learn and try something new. The first book was really a lot about Lakshmi's interior feelings, her emotions, how she is changing throughout the novel, and what she ultimately decides is more important for her than something else. The second book, you'll notice, has more of a mystery to it. And I had not anticipated that, but that's where Malik's narrative took me. And I'm actually delighted because I love mystery. I love mystery stories. I'm always reading mystery stories. And I had no idea that one day it would all come through in a narrative for me. Now, book number 3 is not about a mystery at all, but it is about Radha. And that's why I'm in Paris right now writing book number 3 about Radha as an adult, in the same way that I wrote about, Malik as an adult in book number 2.
Yeah, I think book 2 starts right away with a mystery. Malik is doing an internship with a construction company. It's Samir's company and Ravi's company. He's not doing the internship with them, but he's working with them. And they built this beautiful theater, this royal theater, seats 1,100 people, I think. and the balcony collapses on opening night. And right away, something doesn't seem right. So you're kind of, what's the mystery? What's the answer to this? And then in Shimla, there's also a mystery where these sheep kind of show up mysteriously, and maybe they're a little more valuable, let's say, than regular sheep. So you had these dual mysteries going on at the same time. Did you have to plot that out? Did it sort of come together organically, or was there a place in the book where you have to start think, how do I bring this all together? Or was it already all together in your head?
No, I never know what's going to happen. As I said, I build it scene by scene. So a scene will come to me and I will, think about it and, who are the characters in that scene? What do they want from one another? I explore all of these questions. And then I know that I need to do some research in order to go further into that scene. So then, I might start doing something like watching sheep shearing videos and trying to find out, how would you hide something on a sheep? And, how do people shear? How do these shepherds shear all of these sheep that they have in their herd? So that leads me then to another plot point. And I think, oh, that's an interesting plot point. I could work with that. So what's the scene that's coming to me with this plot point? And then I'll start working on that scene. It really is like building a necklace. Here's a scene, here's a scene, here's a scene. And then I just sort of, put them all together at the end. I don't even know how it's all going to come together at the end until I get there. So just like the reader, when they're reading it, they don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen either. And to me, that's one of the joys of writing, is that there is so much mystery in what's going to happen with these characters as I am writing it. And I'm getting as much pleasure from figuring out what that mystery is as a reader is. I really think this is one of the best jobs on the planet. All day long, all I do is I think about these characters. I've been living with these same characters now for about 12 years. So I bathe with them. I go for walks with them. I have tea in the morning with them. They are constantly with me. They're on my bike rides and they're on my walks. And sometimes they'll just pop up and say, okay, here's what I think about this. And here's what I think this scene really needs to be. And then I cannot think about it fast enough. I have to make notes. And if I'm walking, let's say if I'm out and about and I have my iPhone, I push it to the memo button, and then I start recording everything that's coming to me in that scene. So at this point, these characters are telling me what they want to say and what they want to do. I know that seems really weird, but they are at that point where they are telling me what they want to accomplish. And so, for example, okay, I'll give you this example. In the second book, where we have Sheila in the bathtub and Malik is washing her hair. I know this is not going to make any sense to anybody, but that is what he's doing. He's washing her hair, and then he stops. And then he says, okay, I'm going to leave you alone now. And he goes down the stairs and out the door. But then, oh my God, what if she drowns in the bathtub because she's inebriated? So he runs back up the stairs. Well, I, as the author, I had my heart in my throat thinking, oh, Malik, don't go back. No, don't go back. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't do it. And so, it's so weird to me that I, as the author, should be in complete control, right? But I'm not. And it really is more interesting for me to let the characters do what they want to do.
Well, it seems like, well, first of all, it's a joy reading it. And the way, when you say you don't know how they're going to end until it happens, as a reader, I was 30 pages, say, from the end of both of the books, and I'd be like, I took a breath and said, what's going to happen? Even as a reader, I didn't quite know where it was going to go. And it was a real joy. I thought you did such a good job. You really nailed the endings of both these books. Now there'll be a little more pressure at the end of the trilogy to see, but hopefully, I think you'll be able to do that too. It was really beautiful.
So, I have spoken to now about 600 book clubs around the world, because the Henna Artist did get translated into 26 languages. And I think now the Secret Keeper has been translated into 6, and it keeps growing. And so As I talk to people around the world, they say, oh, it can't be over after 3. Please, why don't you do what J.K. Rowling did? And then she started developing these little novellas about some of the more minor characters in the book, because their lives seem pretty full when you're writing about them. So why don't you, bring that out? Who knows? Maybe I'll do something like that. I have no idea, because I'm going to miss these guys. When they are gone, I will miss them. They have become a part of me. And, I certainly don't want to, forget to tell you, Arsen, and also, all the independent bookshops around that area, that when you read books like ours, as closely as you have done with mine, and you're able to talk to your clients about them, your patrons about them, that is just warms the cockles of my heart. It just warms me to know that booksellers love books so much that they will recommend books, that they will talk about the books, that they will talk about these characters like you're talking about to me, that, whom I just treasure. I adore these characters, whether or not they're doing good or bad. I have to love them. I love them all, regardless of what they're doing, because if I don't have empathy for them, how can the reader ever have empathy for them?
So we're getting towards the end, but I did want to ask you, there is a quote in the second book, The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, where Lakshmi says there's more power in keeping a secret than in betraying it. And I wonder if you could talk about that, and how does that give Lakshmi power?
Well, I think that you choose your moments of revealing the secrets that you know about people. And when you can choose those moments cleverly, you can get everything you want. And I think that that's what Lakshmi is saying. So rather than just spilling out a secret for the value of just saying, oh, I know a secret you don't know, it is much better to use it strategically to get what you want in the end, to be able to say, I know this secret about you. How about, we negotiate how this scene is going to play forward based on what I know about you. In The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, I have to tell you, I do not come up with the titles of my books. I am not a good titler. So I do not do that. The folks at HarperCollins have great art departments. They come up with the designs for my book covers. I don't do any of that. And so when they came up with The Secret Keeper of Jaipur, I said, oh, okay, you know what? I like that title better than any of the other ones that you have suggested so far. They said, great. So what I was thinking in my head is that Malik was going to be the secret keeper because Lakshmi has taught him how to keep secrets so well. Well, then what happened is that I'm talking to all these book groups and they're saying, hey, but Lakshmi keeps secrets too. And by the way, so is Motilal, the jeweler. He keeps secrets. And oh, there's Hakim. He's keeping a secret. Oh, and there's Ravi Singh. He's keeping a secret. There's all these people keeping secrets. So we probably should have called it The Secret Keepers of Jaipur, in retrospect. But there are many secret keepers. And I do think that there is far more value in holding on to a secret and using it judiciously when you need to.
Well, thank you so much. I mean, we could just go on and on. I still have like 8 questions left, but we're going to have to wrap up there. And thank you so much for these beautiful novels.
Oh, you're so welcome. And thank you so much for promoting the books and for helping, and for the Jaipur Literary Festival to even be having me on and talking about these books, because I really want people around the world to see what a beautiful and rich culture I come from.
Alka, Arsen, thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. And as Arsen mentioned, we could have continued forever, but looking at the paucity of time, we had to stop here. So really apologize for that. But thank you so much for being part of JLF Colorado 2021 Virtual Festival. And thank you all for watching and being a great audience. We encourage you to buy the books of our speakers through Boulder Bookstore, our official bookstore partner. If you like the session, do consider supporting us through the Support JLF option button on the right-hand side of your screen. Your support is greatly appreciated. Once again, we'd like to thank all our official partners, donors, supporters, and friends of the festival. We hope you all enjoy these conversations and will tune in for our next session, The Limits of Growth. Shubhangi Swaroop, Sam Pitroda, Bruno Maces in conversation with Marcus Mensch. which is at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and 4:30 a.m. Indian Standard Time. Thank you once again, and now presenting a reading from the JLF Write a Short series by Laird Hunt. Enjoy.
Still life with snow and hammer. The emotions he experienced seemed to have taken hold of the deepest roots and subtlest fibers of his being. And so much the more that it was so subterranean in him, so much the more did he feel its weird inscrutableness. Herman Melville, Pierre, or the ambiguities. One snowy night in my earlier days, I was out playing on the street with a large green-handled hammer. My game was to stand in the middle of the quiet street and throw the hammer up into the dark, snow-filled air, and to let it fall with a pleasantly muffled thunk onto the ground. Before long, I was joined by another equally young individual, one I was in the habit of exchanging blows with, and after wrestling around a little, by whatever mysterious alchemy of adrenaline and alliance that can still take place at that age, we took to standing at opposite ends of the street and flinging the hammer back and forth. To the peculiarly delicious pleasure to be had in launching a hard and heavy object up into the air and waiting for it to fall, were consequently added the elements of targeting, trajectory, and return. And it's of the latter aspect that I think especially these strange days. This is because it wasn't very long before, like the lovely knuckleheads we took to standing directly under the point of the hammer's projected descent, and to leaping out of its way at the last second, with the idea that points were to be awarded for the nearest misses, and that the game would be over when one or the other of us was hit. A car door slammed. Someone's mother rapped meaningfully on a window, I'm not sure. My attention wavered, and I got hit, smacked hard on the arm. Pride demanded that I sue for another round. He then, having been winged on the calf, said it could only be settled by going best out of 3. We stood there a moment before the final exchange started, sizing each other up, breathing hard. Then he yelled something and I yelled something back and through. Minutes elapsed as the hammer flew back and forth between us. I believe it had begun to snow harder. We had both achieved the kind of high-pitched frenzy that is not always but can be accompanied by a great deal of shrieking and hopping around. So it was that at the end of the longest and final round, I stood under the looping, falling hammer, looking up into the dark, snowy air with a mixture of terror and exaltation, as well as a sense of irreality, as if it wasn't me about to be hit on the head by a carpenter's hammer, as if there was no snow, as if it wasn't night. Stupid boy, poor child, my mother said. Suddenly, years and years have passed.
Festival like this is a beautiful indication of the kind of thing that I truly, truly believe in, and I think makes our society more whole and more pure.
We do not take it for granted that Boulder was chosen as the first North American satellite festival. It's a huge honor we will not forget, and we are enriched because of it. We are indebted to both the local and international people that came together to make that happen, and we hope it's a tradition that continues for decades to come.
Literary festivals like this one build up an environment and an ecosystem to nurture readers and to promote the business of books. They provide an invaluable forum for writers to connect with other creative people.
We sit there peering into those electronic grids in front of our eyes, and it only increases the desire to see the real thing in the flesh. To actually hear an author speak firsthand, to read from their work, to hear the tones of their voice modulate as they read their most treasured passages of prose.
For us, it's special. This was our mothership, and it continues to be. The other editions that we have across the United States are smaller versions, different programming, but smaller versions.
In a sense, to me, religion and art are the same thing. They're vaguely irrational, but they help make sense of things. Someone who lives with no arts and no religion has very little to live on.
2019 was the 14th consecutive year of decline in global freedom.
You have to think of viruses as intelligent machines, as code crackers. And like all living forms, they have to adapt to their environment.
Imagination is a powerful tool. It doesn't matter which part of the world we are in our situation. Are we behind locked bars? Are we roaming freely? Independent thought and process. Our imagination allows us to soar out of any present circumstances that we find ourselves in. And that really is the power of literature and the written word. It allows us to envision a better future. It allows us to consider our past and make sense of the present. Imagination is a tool to be able to free us from the binds and the constrictions that we find ourselves locked into. We can break free. We can soar through the universe. We can rise up into the darkened night like a firefly, illuminating the world. This is what JLF Boulder, Colorado hopes to bring you. Something to fire your imagination.